Thanks so much for joining. I'm Jason Marzak, Vice President of the Atlantic Council and Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arch Latin America Center. I'll say that song we're listening to, one of my favorites by the great Ray Charles, a great breakup song as well, which is very fitting for our panel today on Hit the Road, Jack. And I'm also very happy to be here. I think I've been in every single one of these North Capitol forums. Absolutely a fantastic event. I'm going to introduce in a moment our panelists, but let me first go ahead and set the scene a little bit before formally introducing our panelists. But I'll tell you, you're in for a great session with the four panelists that we have speaking here today. First, what's happening? China is as we all know, a manufacturing giant, almost a third of global manufacturing output. But that dominance is also under strain. China's factor activity contracted for a sixth consecutive month, just recently, according to official figures. And at the same time, here in Mexico, Chinese firms are also increasing their footprints. In 2023, 17% of new tenants in Mexican industrial parks came from China. Now that did compare to 46%, of course, from U.S. firms. And on trade flows, there's a clear shift. Mexico captured 24% of the U.S. total import market share that China has lost between 2018 and 2024. Mexico now supplies about 15% of U.S. imports, while China's share is roughly 13%. So you see some of these trends. One of the complicating factors, something we'll talk about in this panel today, is the issue of transshipment as well, which is the practice that Chinese firms are, in some cases, circumventing U.S. tariffs by routing goods through Mexico or integrating Chinese inputs into the U.S.-Mexico supply chain. These data points all show that we are at an incredibly profound moment of transition. China's scale and presence is significant, but also an incredible opportunity for North America to evolve its positioning in response to some of these global conditions, and China specifically. So against this backdrop, how can the U.S., Mexico, Canada, how can we convert this moment of flux into an advantage? We're going to explore policy, we'll explore investments, we'll explore trade realignments, and how all that can help to support resilient regional supply chains. So, as I mentioned, we have here with a wonderful panel. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, starting next to me and making my way down the line, not in any order of preference, just in order of the seating of the panelists. But seating directly next to me is Jorge Gonzalez Enriquez. He's the co-CEO of the Nearshore Company, which is working directly with multinationals relocating operations to Mexico. And Jorge is really on the front line of supply chain transformation. We'll talk about that, Jorge, as part of the panel. Next to Jorge is Valeria Moy. Valeria is the CEO of IMCO and also a NCF 25 fellow. Fantastic, Valeria. Valeria is one of Mexico's leading economists, shaping national debate on competitiveness, energy, and labor. I'm also proud to say that she's a former non-resident senior fellow of the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arch Latin America Center. Next to Valeria is Glenn Hammer. Glenn is the president and CEO of the Texas Association of Business. Glenn is a real key U.S. business voice, linking Texas economy to cross-border trade and innovation. So you'll get to hear a lot more from Glenn about that over the course of the panel. And then finally, rounding out our panel at the end is Ambassador Julian Ventura. Julian is a former deputy foreign minister, former ambassador to China and the UK. And Julian, I think one of the people here who Mexican voices who best understands China's evolving role. I see Valeria nodded her head in agreement. So really, I couldn't imagine a better panel. So really excited just to jump into the conversation. What we're going to do is we're gonna first focus on diagnosing. We'll look ahead, and then we'll talk about recommendations. We'll also feel free to ask your questions. There's a function in your North Capitol Forum app to bring in questions. I'll bring those into into the panel as we're talking. But I think as we go in this panel, I think it's just incredibly important to point out there again that the choices that we make in the next few years, starting with this review process of the USMCA, whether it's infrastructure, investment rules, industrial policy, name for a few, these choices are going to have profound impacts on this region in the new global order. And I think it's important to always think about North America, the factors of China at this moment that we do at the Atlantic Council. We're a global institution thinking about how the world is profoundly transitioning. We're at kind of the dawn of the new beginning of what the world order is going to look like, and how do we ensure that North America remains strong and viable in that context. So Valeria, I'm going to start with you. As we look at diagnosing the issue, what does some of the economic uncertainty here in Mexico, what does economic uncertainty mean for the relationship with China? And also, what do you see from a broader sense of some of the opportunities or challenges that are being created through this moment of economic uncertainty that we're all living through? That's for you. Yeah.
Well, of course.
That's because you're sitting in the
middle. No, yeah, I got it. Don't worry. Well, uncertainty. Uncertainty, I think, is hitting us badly. Not only the exogenous uncertainty, we have endogenous uncertainty. We receive the uncertainty from the US, but we are also creating our own uncertainty here in Mexico with the judiciary reform and several other reforms. But in that very weird moment, very strange historical moment that we're living, we also have to deal with China. And to be very honest, except from very few people, among who is Ambassador Julia Ventura, very few people understand China. And then we're always making recommendations. For example, the Plan Mexico regarding China, but we don't understand China. So one of the best examples of this is all the tariffs that we just implemented to many, over 1,400 items that we import from China and other countries. But I think this has a special dedicatory to China's goods. And we still don't know the impact that those tariffs will have on Mexico. One of the rationales behind this is that we are going to strengthen the internal supply chains, and I understand that. But of course, that takes time. In order to create a very solid industrial policy, and in order to try to eventually substitute Chinese goods in order to produce them locally or domestically, or even within the region, even within North America, even using the USMCA capabilities and get in touch with the US and Canada in order to try to substitute the things that we buy from China, that takes time. And instead of doing the core to substitute those imports, we're going through the easiest solution that, of course, is not a solution, and that's implementing tariffs. So if we can't solve the huge issues, the only thing that we're going to create is more disruption in the chain, and I think that's the uncertainty that we are creating. Yeah. We are ourselves creating.
So I want to pivot from Valeria's point to you, Jorge, because as Valeria said, we don't. I'll get to you, Ambassador Ventura, in a moment. As you said, we don't understand China, so help us to understand a little bit more in a moment. But let me go to you first, Jorge, because as Valeria said, the tariffs are they're a response to reduce dependence on China, but it takes time, and we need to look at what are the impact on supply chains, how do we reposition supply chains. As I mentioned at the outset, China is far ahead in terms of manufacturing. It's going to take a long time to reposition supply chains into North America. So how can we, whether it's we being countries, you from as companies and looking with the corporates that you work with, how can we best contend with this reality? I mean, what do we need to be doing now as we're looking to reposition these supply chains, and how do we most effectively catch up?
Well, first of all, I'll say it's an honor to be here in this panel with such well-prepared and intelligent people. I've been to all of the North Capital forums, and I have to speak with Enrique this time because this is I'm definitely the least smart person in this panel. So I have to speak to Enrique about next year's panel. No, I'll say that, yeah, we talk to companies all the time. And the desire to move manufacturing to Mexico is there. So you have companies that want to do it. They want to pull the trigger. They made up their mind. But then execution, that's where the problem is. Because as Valeria said, I don't think anybody really understands China. And there I'm including, as you mentioned, the complexity and the level of manufacturing that China has. It's impressive. So when we talk to companies, they're saying, I want to move to Mexico. Here's my bill of materials. Help me find suppliers. Well, many of these suppliers cannot be found in Mexico. And so you're scrambling to say, okay, I need regional content to be able to qualify for USMCA preferential tariffs. I'm going to bring the least possible materials from China that I can, just to qualify. So they're kind of still stuck with China, even though the desire is there to break up, as you mentioned with the song.
Yeah.
There's an intent to break. They want to break up with their girlfriend and they can't because there's so many entanglements and relationships. And so we are working many times with these Chinese suppliers, and we're trying to juggle, and sort of, it's a weird feeling because it's as if people are waiting for the Mexican government to start doing something to like plan Mexico, but then it seems like it's not enough, and time is running, right? And so it's a bit of a frustrating situation. And companies are doing it, right? I mean, but others are still in wait mode, and they're analyzing options because Mexico, by the way, is not their only option to move out of China. And so, yeah, we have to get to work fast.
Just a quick follow-up, Jorge, before I go to Julian. You said companies don't understand how to reposition their supply chain. They don't understand what they can, kind of how Mexico can be helping to fulfill some of the processing the supply chains that China have been doing. What's the biggest kind of misunderstanding or misconception that you're hearing from companies that are seeking to bring more manufacturing here, but are being challenged in doing so?
Yeah, I would say the biggest misconception is that U.S. companies have been spoiled for the past 30 years by going to China, because in China, they were dealing with one person, one window, one-stop shop that did everything for these companies, right? And so there was this sort of a black box in terms of supply chain, sourcing, manufacturing. And they are coming to Mexico, the companies, executives, they're coming to Mexico looking for the same thing. And that figure doesn't exist in Mexico. In Mexico, they have to be talking to 5, 6, 7, even 10 different suppliers and try to do what this Chinese representative or Chinese factory did. Now companies are scrambling to replicate that themselves, and many of these companies don't have the know-how and they're not built for that. So I'd say that's one of the main misconceptions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Julian, I'm gonna go to you and then Glenn to round out this first round of interventions. But Julian, from your perspective, what are some of the maybe specific sectors that because it's one thing, Jorge's talking about companies coming here to Mexico and how do we take advantage of the opportunities that this new reorder is presenting. But what are some of the sectors that we need to be focusing on? Where are the greatest kind of opportunities? And also, where do you see some of the threats from a sectoral level, insofar as what needs to be accomplished to really be able to take advantage of this opportunity that we're presented with right now?
Well, picking up on what Valeria mentioned, uncertainty is the name of the game, and also it takes time to do things. We have to remember that maybe 70 to 80% of stuff that we import from China is not jeans, it's not textiles, it's not footwear, it's capital goods, it's intermediate goods and to wean yourself, your supply chains from that sourcing is something that is difficult. Ideally, as we move forward talking with Canadians and particularly the US, you can have a smart strategic approach to do this, giving enough space for a coordinated transition on some of the issues the sectors which I'll mention, but we've seen over the last few months that that's not necessarily going to happen. Things are going to change fast, and also because there will be tremendous political pressure. Regardless of what the facts on the ground are, perceptions are sticky. And going forward, Mexico can't afford to be seen as the weak link in North America or as a backdoor to the mix in terms of foreign inputs and global supply chains. So it has to be seen as acting proactively. And that's what we're seeing right now on the tariff front, where there's already a move toward alignment. It's not necessarily coordinated. It's not necessarily harmonic. I think we're going to see more of that. We're going to see that, I think, over the next few months on sectors such as medical devices, medical supplies, perhaps some pharma, critical technologies, particularly components that are used either in the aerospace or the automotive industry, issues related to whatever is most embedded in North American supply chains that is easiest to identify as non-North American sourced. So we're going to have that short-term, high-pressure process in a balancing act in which Mexico has become quite accustomed to. You mentioned the 1,400 tariff lines that have just been announced. Well, in many ways, Mexico was the tariff pioneer with China. Sometimes we forget that we were the last country to let China into the WTO. And at that time, in a sort of a through the looking glass kind of scenario, we were under tremendous pressure from the White House, from the Clinton administration, to close the deal with China. They closed their deal on the WTO accession almost 2 years before we did. And at that time, there were about 1,300 tariff lines with 6 to 8 year transition periods that were extended. A lot of had a protectionist angle because of the stage that we were in our trading relationships, but it's not something new. The geopolitical context is different now. The strategic imperatives are different. So how we move in those key sectors that I've mentioned for more alignment, and regardless of the policy effectiveness of tariffs as a tool, we're going to have to be moving in that direction going forward.
Julian, I'm going to come back to you on alignment, but I want to ask you a first question for you. Valeria mentioned at the outset we don't understand China. What do you think, Julian, is the biggest misunderstanding of China?
Well, one of the biggest misunderstandings is that, in the U.S.-Mexico relationship, perhaps in the pre-Trump era, we were very used to sort of building silos to deal with the various issues of the bilateral relationship. Trade had a strictly trade dynamic, security and migration. That is gone now, and that is the reality. And that is something that the Chinese, and sometimes we don't understand it, does that very, very comfortably. So when we look, for example, at possible reactions from China as to the tariff initiatives that Mexico has presented through Congress, it could have done just through an executive decision, but they want that coverage, that political coverage, to move forward on this. And we're looking at, China is going to start investigations on specific exports from Mexico, non-tariff barriers. That's not the whole picture. We've seen, for example, how fentanyl and migration have become top of mind issues for President Trump. Mexico has made tremendous progress in demonstrating with hard data progress on the migration and fentanyl front. While on the fentanyl front, we can't move 1 inch without functional dialogue with the Chinese. When President Trump implemented his first round of massive tariffs against China during his first term, China, very quietly put its hands down and stopped customs inspections, precursor laboratory inspections that had been negotiated during the Obama administration. And we saw the spike in overdose deaths in the U.S. and in precursor flows to Canadian Pacific ports and to Mexican Pacific ports.
Julia, I'm going to go ahead. And jump here and bring it back to Glenn. But those are, I think, really important context insofar as what we don't understand about China. What we need to factor it even more so. Glenn, I want to bring to you from a Texas perspective. I even see you're wearing your Texas pin.
That's right.
But how should, especially given the opportunities on cross border and investment opportunities with Texas specifically, but U.S. overall, how should we be thinking about everything you've heard from Valeria and Jorge and Julian insofar as the opportunities of relocating supply chains? How should the U.S. and Mexico be better collaborating? What are some of those opportunities that you're hearing from some of your business in Texas to better build products together?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jason. And again, I also want to thank Enrique, another great addition of the North Capital Forum. Texas as the largest export state by far, getting the relationship right with our trading partners in the United States and in Texas, incredibly important. We export twice as much as California, for example. Mexico, when you think about the trading relationship, we are at an all-time record, thanks to USMCA, of $281 billion of cross-border trade with Mexico, and with Canada, it's now hit a record of $75 billion. So there are two top trading partners. And Jason, I also need to say that, when you talk about the USMCA, which was basically executed during the first Trump administration, it's the trade agreement in the United States that passed with the most votes of any trade deal in our history, except for the first one in the U.S., which was under the Reagan administration with Israel. Every member of the congressional delegation that was in power at the time in Texas, that's about 6 or so years ago, voted for it. It was that popular, right to left. The way we look at it is we need to make sure that the USMCA, which we agree with President Trump when he said it was the most successful trade deal ever negotiated, we need to make sure that as the review process goes on, that if I could use the revision word, make it stronger and make it easier for us to compete with China, because we build products together. It's not just the tariff-free treatment now with the USMCA compliant goods that allows me to eat my avocado toast tariff-free, which I appreciate. Yeah. It's all the stuff, consumer electronics, semiconductors, advanced automobiles, and we might talk a little bit later about AI, that we need strong partners. I just also wanted to quickly say on the China side, as someone who worked for a member of Congress who was the only fluent Mandarin speaker at the time and worked hard on PNTR during the Clinton administration, to understand China, it is very important. And I would just quickly recommend Ambassador to the U.S., former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd has written 2 great books on China. Ling Ling Wei, Superpower Showdown, great reporter for the Wall Street Journal. And I urge everyone, this book just came out, Dan Wang, it's breakneck about how China is approaching technology. And basically the punchline there, which I think is important, the U.S. is filled with a bunch of lawmakers who are lawyers. China, they're all engineers. So the bottom line is this, the timing of this forum couldn't be any better, because the business community and the political community who agree that the USMCA is a great agreement, we definitely need more power in the age of AI. We need to unify and make sure that agreement is extended, expanded, and improved, so that we can better compete with China.
And there's specific benefits, obviously, as we were talking before, for Texas specifically. I want to remind people, if you have a question, you can do so through the app, and I'll be monitoring any questions that come in. But I want to shift to looking ahead and go back to you, Jorge. You were mentioning in your first intervention the challenges with finding suppliers. And there's still kind of, even though there's a desire to relocate supply chains, there's still this dependence in certain areas on China. What could be done? What needs to be done so that, especially Mexican SMEs are better equipped to be providers for the U.S., for North American supply chains? Of course, President Sheinbaum, as part of Plan Mexico, has talked about boosting local, domestic production. but small business growth is so fundamental for that supply chain. And so, what are you hearing from some of the companies that are wanting to bring their supply chains here? They're struggling, and what do they want to what do they need to see from Mexican SMEs to be able to achieve what their end goal is, which is being much more kind of North American focused in their broader supply chains?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can think of a lot of things that can get done, and as always, it's in the execution that the challenges really come up, and so, I mean, trying to stay close to reality, because a lot of these ideas may sound very exciting, but very difficult and to implement. And the difficulty may be in the will of the countries and the time that it takes. But I think first there needs to be an understanding of what I was saying, that it's not like, oh, China leaves and Mexico comes in, and it's like, oh, instead of an iPhone, I'm going to buy a Samsung. I mean, it's not that simple. No?
Yeah.
And I think that's really create this awareness of companies that are coming to Mexico, that they're going to have to deal with a different type of supplier. No. The other thing, and some of these things that I'm going to say are actually maybe quite simple, but there is no visibility, for example, of the supplier base in Mexico, right? There's like the ThomasNet. I don't know if you know what the ThomasNet directory in the US is. It's just a listing of all the suppliers, right? And it's public.
Well, you were talking earlier that companies are used to having a one-stop shop in China. So is there an opportunity to do something along?
Well, the thing is, there are some companies like ourselves that are trying to replicate some of that, but it takes such a long time.
Yeah.
Such a long time. I mean, I was talking to a CEO of a large multinational in the electric sector yesterday, and he was telling me that it took them 20 to 25 years to build their Mexican supply chain. I mean, but that's probably a very specific, complex, and maybe we're not everybody looking at 25 years, but it just tells you that to get a supplier to the level that Chinese suppliers are now, it takes a very long time. And when I said, what took you the most? And he told me, well, one of the things that we realized that were the biggest obstacles is that the suppliers in Mexico could not get financing, for example, to invest in equipment. So they were struggling with that, so they had to help some of these suppliers. The other one was red tape. I mean, Claudia Sheinbaum said at one point that it took more than 2 years for a company to set up an operation in Mexico that's able to export under the IMEX program. 2 years. I mean, there's so much red tape. So these Mexican suppliers, they really need things to work in their favor, not against them. And don't get me started with the tax situation and the security or insecurity or safety. So there's all these Mexican suppliers that everybody's betting on. They really need help, and that help from governments on both sides of the border, and also from big multinationals, right?
Yeah, as you're saying, looking at the broader ecosystem that allows suppliers to be able to thrive. I'm gonna go back to you, Valeria. Then I'm gonna go ask you a question I got from the audience, and then I'll go back to you, Julian, on the on tariffs and alignment. But Valeria, as we're entering the USMCA review, what are some of the specific ideas or revisions, improvements that you see that could be done to help North America to better to outcompete China? What is currently holding us back from some of these commitments? I think we were talking earlier, Julian, you were talking earlier about specific kind of sectoral based focus, tariffs insofar as the USMCA. But what do you see some of the top issues that could be put forward as part of this review that could really help to propel us as a region to be much more competitive?
I'm going to say something that's really obvious, but it's worrisome that we haven't done it. And it's, why aren't we more integrated in terms of energy? We are not going to be able to compete with China individually if we don't integrate the three economies regarding energy. So, for example, when we see the electricity grid, it's pretty similar in the south of the United States with the north of Mexico. But of course, it starts like diffuminating. So the south of Mexico has nothing to do with the north part of Mexico. I think we need to start thinking outside the box, because when Jorge was telling that one of these huge firms took 20 to 25 years to get a Mexican supply chain, domestic supply chain, we need to think outside the box. We need to start to do things differently. Because if we're going to think about doing the same things and it's going to take us 20 years, and if we want to open a small restaurant and it's going to take us 2 years and red tape, and then you have to bribe someone to give you the permit, we need to think differently. So I think that we should start thinking about integrating. Energetically speaking, we need to forget about the security sovereignty issues. Of course, that won't happen, but that's my wish list. I think that it is very important to start to think as a region instead of three different countries. Because if we don't think as a region, we're not going to be able at all to compete with China.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our ability to compete with China is our ability to work together across North America. Left alone, we don't have the ability to necessarily do so. Julian, I want to go back to you were talking previously about the tariff policy, and as you think about what are some of the opportunities and tariff policy, but also we look at kind of alignment. And do you see is there alignment between the U.S. and Mexico on tariff policy? Is that a possibility? Of course, the President Sheinbaum put forward tariffs, a few weeks ago. And if that is a possibility, what does that alignment look like?
Well, I'm a big believer in North American convergence across a wide range of issues, but it has to be smart convergence. We have to see how the end game plays out. On tariffs, we're going to see it inevitably. I think we're going to see it in the auto sector, for example. A big chunk of the package that Mexico has announced has to do with cars, the highest on Chinese finished cars of 50%. Those don't go to the U.S. Market, they're for the internal market. But there's a whole range of products where you could make an argument for less gaps between what the three countries are doing. And if you go down the line on those issues that I mentioned, medical, some critical technologies, that kind of convergence and North American approach to Chinese exports is something that's very smart. On China, I think that smart move by Mexico, and it's moving forward on some of these fronts, is to take as many China-specific related issues off the review table through prior verifiable national actions on, for example, port security, port revisions, port inspections, customs enforcement, action against contraband, action against transshipment of goods, however small it is. Building up a menu of those kinds of initiatives, and also I would add the investment screening for a national security dimension, is something where, much as it is done with migration and fentanyl, Mexico could come to the table and say, look, I've done this, not just on regulations, but also on implementation. And that's, I think, the focus that we need to take over the next few months.
Mm-hmm. Maybe just, Julian, on CFIUS specifically, I mean, how do you see that the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, is that a potential process that could be used to on the Mexican side as well, where there could be some, as you're talking about, some kind of pre-agreement that helps to better protect investment opportunities coming here into Mexico?
It could be an approach. I read some media reports over the last few days that Mexico has already shared some language with Washington on investment screening proposals. Prime Minister Carney of Canada was here a few days ago, and one of the actions that they agreed upon, that there was going to be an exchange of best practices as a way to strengthen national security, North American enforcement. maybe not in some of the specific pre-screening or pre-authorization that's contemplated in CFIUS, but it has to be something, again, that is credible and that can be monitored transparently by the other two partners. So we're going to have to move that on in that direction, definitely.
So I think, Glenn, we're talking as part of this panel about the many opportunities that are presented. I think this panel seems, I'm taking the temperature seems right now, maybe relatively optimistic that there can be a lot of gains for Mexico, for North America. We just got to focus on specific policies, specific actions, how to foster the growth of SMEs. Great point from Valeria. I'm thinking about out of the box on energy, among other issues. But Glenn, how does Texas specifically stand to benefit from supply chains coming back to Mexico? What are you seeing insofar as some of the untapped opportunities for cross-border collaboration that could potentially emerge?
Yeah, and the energy point is very important, and we consider Texas to be the energy capital of the world of all kinds. We're Jason, we're not just number one on oil and natural gas. We're number one on deployed photovoltaics, far and away number one on wind. Batteries is going up. We'll be the nuclear capital when it comes to small modular reactors. I see a lot right now through the lens of AI. You take a look at where a lot of these big investments are occurring. Think about Stargate, think about Apple, think about NVIDIA. There's incredible opportunities for Mexico, Canada, and the United States. All of these major companies have huge operations north and south of our border. In fact, I was at a Tech de Monterrey event a few weeks ago here in Mexico City, and with NVIDIA, Meta, all the big companies, Amazon, Walmart, and incredible excitement on the human capital side of what we could do, because Mexico is producing so many engineers, and I would say Canada has, in my opinion, a very good, high-skilled immigration policy. So from the point of view of Texas, the more we can integrate as the economy moves into the age of AI, the more prosperous we'll be, because Texas has been in the center of all of these major announcements. Sam Altman was just in Abilene, Texas a week or two ago. And, I'll just also say I want to thank, on the subnational level, great governors. It's great that Governor Manolo Jimenez is here. He was just in Texas, because a lot of these opportunities we are going to need our neighbors north and south to fulfill. And the final point I'll make in terms of just the right economic model, and I don't say this flippantly, but well within our lifetimes, if at least mine, if I continue to take creatine, Texas will pass California in terms of the top economy in the United States, most number of people. We're now number 8 in terms of GDP worldwide at 2.7 trillion. So in terms of building things, look at Texas. The Gigafactory went up in 18 months. There's places you can't get a house up in 18 months. So I think that that's an important part of this as well. And as we strengthen the USMCA, there'll be more opportunities for Texas. And we just all need to unite around and remind everyone that agreement has been a spectacular success. Before it, China was the top trading partner of the U.S. Now it's 3. Mexico is 1. Canada's 2, and let's keep it that way and build on that success.
Glenn, just a quick follow-up for you. Talk a little bit more about AI. How can Mexico, you were mentioning briefly some of the technology firms, but how can Mexico best embrace America's AI action plan that the White House released?
So in July, David Sachs and company, they introduced the America's AI action plan. It's the best federal government plan for the United States to win in an important area that I've ever seen. And the race is between the United States and China. Europe is basically irrelevant in this race. But the key here is going to be to get the world to accept the US AI tech stack. Just think about semiconductors, all the excitement in Mexico and Canada when the CHIPS bill went through. There should be that same level of excitement for AI. And the country in the world that understands this better than anyone has done the best job, the UAE. They immediately endorsed the administration's AI action plan. Abu Dhabi, I was just at an investment forum. They are committing $1.4 trillion connected to the AI action plan. So I would say as the USMCA is being renegotiated or reviewed, add on a provision for all 3 countries to embrace the AI, the America, you could say the Americas, let's broaden it out, AI tech stack, and get that tech stack all over the world. Because right now, China, through some different models, is actually penetrating a lot of the developing countries. And that's an area where we could use the help, both in terms of physical and the intellectual talent of both countries for the U.S. to win the biggest battle of the 21st century. And that's the battle for AI supremacy, which will determine military and economic dominance,
which is
for
of
this
course
century.
something we weren't contemplating when the USMCA was put together a few years ago, right? But something incredibly important to think about. I need to
At least Grok told me to say that, so I don't know.
Julian, I'm going to ask you a question. There was a question that came in from Claudia Avila, who is with International Affairs at ANAM, and she's asking, if you could talk a little bit about the impact. Great question here about the impact of China's logistics and technologies global strategy as part of its rival with the U.S. and how Mexico stands in this scenario. So if you could help to kind of pull us back a little bit, Julian, and look at China's broader logistical and technology strategy, and what does that mean for what does that mean for Mexico?
Much as it is on renewables and in clean energy, China has really developed, powerhouse capacities in terms of logistics and some of the things that Claudia is mentioning. Mexico is not as exposed in terms of that Chinese footprint because that kind of capacity tends to follow patterns, FDI patterns by China, and most Chinese FDI is still linked to commodities and logistics related to commodities. So we have to look, for example, at how you address that in the ports. And I think a good antidote for that is to really strengthen the North American port cooperation, connectivity, uniformity in procedures to really give ground to, strengthening capacities in that area. Again, these processes take time. They require smart policy action. We can't do it overnight. So maybe we should change the song a little bit from Hit the Road Jack, but to Hit the Road Jack, but do it slower.
Thank you so much, Julian. We're just about out of time, but I want to give maybe a last 30 seconds to the other panelists to say anything you think we've missed that you think was important and certain in the conversation with regard to how do we help to strengthen our supply chains? How do we help to diversify away from China? What are we missing? We've talked about energy. We've talked about helping to facilitate SME growth. We've talked about needing to better understand China and China's broader role. We've talked about going beyond tariffs. Tariffs are part of this, but that's there needs to be a longer term strategy. We talked AI. What else, Valeria?
Just a brief note. I was in China in June, and I was surprised the way China is using AI to modify all its processes, the way they produce and the way they study health and they produce doctors. So I think that we should learn something from that.
Yeah. Well, there's now essentially kind of dark factories in China, right? That are just
Completely.
producing 24 hours a day, and there's no humans,
light. Yeah.
with no light, right?
It's amazing.
Jorge.
Well, more than not being said, I would underline what Valeria shared some moments ago on the wishful thinking. Going forward with the USMCA review, it's something that has been talked a lot about in these past 2 days. We have to think different, a different approach, and it's about looking at the region as a single entity. So I think we just have to take that step. Easier said than done. But going forward, I would like to underline that I see also that being the key to making this region or capitalizing on all the positive aspects that this region has.
Yeah. I think as we're looking at things globally, Jorge, USMCA and a strong USMCA is not just a nice to have these days, but it's a must have.
It's a must have.
It's a must-have as we look at the way that the world order is reshaping, and so how do we bring into this review, and how also as we look at kind of North America's movements to disassociate as much as possible, because it's not going to be possible 100% entirely. Where can we do that? What sectors we then need to help to grow as well? We're unfortunately, I believe, out of time. So please join me with a round of applause for thanking all of our panelists.